I've had a great day yesterday. Today, I've asked health journalist Jerome Byrne, who is no stranger to writing columns in our nation's best-selling Sunday newspapers. I asked him why there's not a national focus on good nutrition to solve our health crisis.
Well, there's one simple answer is simply that the kind of things which a nutritional approach offers doesn't make very much money. There isn't a product which you can sell. In fact, very often the nutritional approach involves eating better food or not eating certain foods. And so that's one issue. The other issue is that if you want to do research on anything, on drugs, drug companies are delighted to do it. But we don't really have a system to research things which don't make a large profit.
See, just as I told you in the week, sadly, it's all about corporate wealth and not your health. There's a dirty little secret that the big food companies don't want to admit to, and scientists aren't willing to say that they got it wrong. And that is that both the low-fat diet and the reduced calorie diet have already been proven time and time again to fail. Both the low-fat diet and the reduced calorie diet are both cruel hoaxes. Hoaxes that leave people like you and me feeling weak and lacking energy. And most importantly, while they might show a little weight loss at the beginning, tend to make people that do them put on even more weight afterwards. I know this because I've been there, like for 20 years. For 20 years I was imprisoned in my own fat body. Back then I thought I had freedom, but I didn't. I was in the food trap, the obesity cycle. I was on that carb coaster that we've talked about several times. No, restricting calories, cutting fat are just cruel myths, and they don't work, not at all. In the week, you heard from Professor Robert Lustig, and he explained to us, didn't he, how we spend a lot of money on hedonic pleasures, trying to make ourselves happy. But we get it all confused because happiness and pleasure are different things, and hedonic pleasures are not happiness, but they're pleasure. And seeking too much pleasure actually reduces our happiness. You see, if we keep repeating these hedonic pleasures, it drives up the release of that neurotransmitter dopamine, which, if we do over and over again, means that we have less dopamine receptors. If we have less dopamine receptors, we get less reward as time goes on. It's why when you first start drinking, one glass of wine might make you happy. Then eventually, months later, you need 2 glasses of wine to get the same effect. Then eventually you need half a bottle to get the same effect. Or it might be that one donut used to make you happy, but now you need 3 or 4, because the more you keep repeating your dopamine rushes, the less the receptors take in the dopamine. On top of that, it increases our stress hormone, cortisol. And a third thing happens here, and that is that while we're having more of the hormones, dopamine, for our rewards, we get less time, less space in the brain for our happiness hormone called serotonin. The trouble is, though, pleasure drives the current economy. You can sell pleasure and make huge profits and drive mass taxes and revenues for the governments. Pleasure creates the stock market, the GDP. But it also, sadly, makes us less happy and much, much fatter. Sadly, there's no profit, or certainly very, very little profit, in selling happiness. That is why we have to do it for ourselves. The whole system is geared towards pleasure, but for us to truly be happy, we have to do it for ourselves. And this is why I claimed from the outset that as you learn to differentiate between the two, between happiness and pleasure and happiness, not only on this reset are you going to lose weight, together we're going to become much happier. Now, I know this week may have felt a little bit unstructured, but actually it was the opposite. We covered some real great groundworks and we laid some really strong foundations together. And boy, did I throw a lot of stuff at you. And don't worry if you can't remember everything that we've talked about, because a lot of it will pick up again throughout the program. Over the next week, of course, the last week before we change some of your food choices, I want you, every time that you decide to give yourself a treat, maybe a glass of wine or a donut or a jam tart or a sandwich, I want you to make a note of how you get a rush of pleasure the second you make that decision to have something that you probably know is a little bit naughty. I want you to see how you get sort of an instant reward on just making the decision. And as you experience that feeling of pleasure just on making the decision, I want you to then sort of enter into a bit of a dialogue with your gremlin. I want to see how you have a chat with them. I want you to see what demands the gremlin's putting on you. I want you to see if it triggers that priming that we were talking about, where you just want more and more and more. But another thing I'd like you to do, because we know we've got to change those food choices moving forward, I'd like you to try a little trick with your gremlin this week. When you have maybe that donut, which you know really deep down, don't you, we're probably going to get rid of in a week's time, I want you to say something along the lines to your gremlin, along the lines of, look, we both know this is unhealthy, but I'm going to let you have it your way this week. But then I am taking charge of our food choices. I want you to look at your gremlin in your brain. I want you to write all this down, and I really want you to convince your gremlin that this is his last week where he's in control, because moving forward, you've got to tell that gremlin that you want to make the food choices for yourself. Now, write down your dialogue, listen to your gremlin and his responses, and really, really interact with your journal and get all your thoughts down on paper. Here's a short clip from Peter Cohen with his advice on this very subject.
Learn to think greater than you feel. Do not allow yourself to be conditioned by how you feel. You've got to learn to just take action more decisively.
Isn't that interesting? Think greater than you feel. Thinking is the human brain, of course, and feelings is your gremlin. That's certainly when it comes to food. I think that virtually everyone living in the modern world today, especially when it comes to food choices, needs to think more about their food than feel about their food. Why? Well, because never before have so many people got so much to lose. And this is the sad state of the modern world. You know, for the first time in history, more people on the planet are overweight than underweight. Obesity now causes millions of deaths per year around the so-called modern world. And as a result, sadly, so many people that go on diets, that go to the Weight Watchers, that go on calorie restrictions, they'll repeatedly just fail and fail and fail and fail, because all of those diets are about counting calories. They're about self-deprivation. They're about giving things up. And what happens eventually, of course, is people stop the diet and put on more weight than they started with. But you're not one of those, because you're not on a diet program right now. Together, we're going to change your way of life. We're going to change what it is that you fall in love with when it comes to food. And remember, we do this because we're not focusing on the belly, but we're focusing on the brain. And that's the only way, it's the only way to enjoy good health, a slender body, and happiness. The only way is to rechange the wiring in your brain in a way that it can work and survive and thrive in modern society. And sadly, in fact, just last night, I saw an advert on television from Cancer Research UK, and they were reminding us, because they were trying to get people obviously to donate to their research, they were reminding us that sadly in the UK, 1 in 2 people alive today will at some stage in their life now develop a cancer. We've got to change this. We can't keep accepting the unacceptable. And the best way to change this, as we've heard in the week from the World Health Organization and the United Nations, the best way to do this is to change our relationship with food. Most of those illnesses, along with obesity, are down to one thing and one thing only, and that is the food choices that we are making, but mainly subconsciously. One of the things we learned this week, hopefully, is that it is about your hormones and not calories, and particularly the hormone that is insulin, your fat storage hormone that caused you to gain the weight. Also, I hope that you learned that the obesity epidemic that we're facing is so closely entwined to the metabolic syndrome pandemic that we have, and you can't really today separate big overweight from the cancers, the Alzheimer's, the strokes, the heart disease, and so on. They are all intertwined, and the main driving force behind all of these is how we've changed our diet. And basically, we're no longer eating a diet that is fit for the human body. And frighteningly, it's actually what I call a localized problem. Well, I say localized, it's a problem of the modernized world, the commercial world. We don't see it when I'm out in the bush in Africa. I didn't see it when I was up in the Arctic Circle. All these illnesses, they just don't exist in many parts of the world. And it's all down to the modern diet that we're eating, a diet that's not fit for human consumption, a diet that makes us overfed yet undernourished. Let me now introduce another good friend of mine. This is Dr. Shan Hussein.
If we look at Western illnesses, we often find in various tribes around different parts of the world that these illnesses don't exist simply because they have completely different lifestyles. They have different amounts of activity, they have different amounts of sunshine that they receive, and they eat completely different foods. They eat whole foods, seasonal foods, natural foods that they can find that are easily accessed. And I think it's important to see where the correlation is there, in terms of cause and effect, how a group of people are living their lives and how it's showing up in illness. Increasingly, as we look in the Western world, where we have, unfortunately, a greater reliance on processed foods, unhealthy foods, sugary foods, starchy foods, and we're not necessarily getting good quality nutrients in terms of good quality proteins, essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals. Unfortunately, this is starting to show up in illness and disease, and we can very easily correlate this. There are studies to actually confirm the correlation, but interestingly, in certain tribes in different parts of the world, in Africa and in Australia, New Zealand, some of them don't actually have any of these chronic diseases. It just doesn't exist. And we've got to really start to understand and see the connection there.
Richard Branson has always taught me that when you love what it is you do for a living, your job, you actually never work a day in your life. What we should do, because life is quite short, is to try and fill our days with things that we love doing. And if you think about that, diets won't work if you end up eating foods that you don't enjoy. What I've got to do, with your help, over the next weeks, is to change what it is that you desire to eat. I want you to have healthy cravings. I want you to really crave and be passionate about real good healthy food. And that's what we're going to do over the coming weeks. Next week we'll do a bit more groundwork like we've done this week, but then the last 5 weeks we're going to have some great inspiration, some chefs. We're going to have some great ideas of how you can jazz up the food that you create at home to make you more passionate and desire it more than the food that you're currently eating. Here's some insightful words from Eric Edemeades.
It's really fascinating. This is how a diet fails you. You're given rules. Here they are. Don't eat this, eat that. Then you rebel against those rules at some point in the diet, and you produce serotonin and dopamine because you feel like a rebel, which makes you feel good. You then eat the junk food and anchor it to the serotonin and dopamine, perpetuating the problem. And in the meantime, your self-esteem is taking a hit because you broke the rules. And so now your self-control has gone further down. That people don't fail diets, diets fail people. That's how they do it. That said, I want to suggest this. Start reading the labels wherever you go. Notice that sugar is in the top 3 ingredients of a great many things that you wouldn't even know had sugar in them. Next time you're in Sainsbury's or you're sitting in the grocery store and you're in Waitrose and you pick up a jar of tomato sauce and you look and you see sugar's number 2 on the ingredient, I say smash it on the floor. Now I'm kidding. I'm not saying you should really smash it on the floor. Go ahead, smash it on the floor. But here's the thing. If you smash it on the damn floor, and if you do that, they'll stop putting it on the shelf. But the real reason I said that to you is to demonstrate one other thing to you, and it's called a psychological trigger. Because there's a very good chance that the next time you're in Waitrose and you pick up that jar, the next time you're in Sainsbury's and you pick up that jar and you look and you see sugar, you're going to have this mental image of me going, smash it on the floor, smash it on the floor. And that is going to be a mental trigger that's going to give you a moment of consciousness to put that thing back on the shelf. And that's where we really have to help people. We have to help them with the psychological piece. People know, eat more good quality, high quality, ethically raised proteins. Eat a wide variety of seasonally available fruits and vegetables. They know all this. But they also know, cut down your refined sugar intake, cut down your processed carb intake, cut down your gross fat intake, the trans fats. They know that too. But willpower doesn't work. And what we have to do is work on helping people with their psychology. If people what they will ultimately do is do what they want. If we're going to help them, we have to change what they want.
I love that from Eric. People don't fail diets, diets fail people. How true is that? And here's an interesting idea. Try and combine all the things that you enjoy throughout this course with things that I'm asking you to do. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, I keep saying you need to drink more water, because you might not be hungry at all. It could be that you're just thirsty. But what happens if you don't like drinking water? I know lots of people that just get bored of water. Well, first thing is try and have it cold, put some ice in, see if that makes a difference. And if you still don't like it, maybe jazz it up with a slice of lemon or a little bit of ginger or some lime. Or maybe you prefer having it warm. Well, if you prefer warm water, have warm water. The key thing is you've got to try. The only thing you will ever keep to and a commitment to yourself is when you enjoy the things that you're doing. And that's just human nature. For example, when I say to you, we need to start walking some more. We're going to talk a lot about walking in coming weeks, how walking is a man's best medicine. Now, maybe right now you go, oh, I just don't like going out for a walk. But let's say you love music. Well, if you love music, combine the two together. When you go out walking, put your headphones on, get a good set of headphones and listen to your favorite music. Or maybe you're really, like I am, in love with nature. Then make the effort, not just go walking around your block, but jump in the car, get out into the countryside or a local forest and combine things together. The key thing that we got to try and achieve in the coming weeks is to find things that you love doing, to find foods that you love eating and preparing for yourself. And that's why you'll be surprised moving forward. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to eat. I'll show you all the foods that make you fat and put on weight. But I'm going to give you a whole bouquet of different healthy options for you to try, but then find the ones that you really love. Because for this lifestyle to change, for you to lose that weight forever, everything you do moving forward has got to be done with enjoyment, with passion and with love. And that is the way we make everlasting change. Now here's the final word for the week from the brilliant professor that is Robert Lustig.
So metabolic syndrome are the constellation of diseases that travel with obesity. So type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease. Turns out this is now 75% of all healthcare costs in both the US and in the UK.
Wow.
Now,
you put a large percentage of that down to what we're eating, consuming?
So people thought this was about obesity. Turns out it's not about obesity. It is true that obesity travels with these diseases. I don't argue that. It is true that obesity is a risk factor for these diseases. I don't argue that too. But normal weight people get all of those diseases as well. In fact, clinical depression causes weight loss, but causes these diseases through the same mechanism, just not through subcutaneous, the fat you can see. Turns out this is the fat you can't see. It's the fat in your organs, it's the fat in your liver. And there are ways you get it. And it turns out sugar is the most potent way of driving fat in your liver, which drives all of these diseases. And now we've demonstrated the mechanism. We even have the molecule, we even have the intermediate by which sugar is metabolized that causes all of these diseases. It's called methylglyoxal. It is an intermediary metabolite of the sugar fructose, and it poisons the liver cell, and in the process drives all of these chronic metabolic diseases. So we now have molecule to disease, disease to medical calamity to agricultural disaster to planetary immolation.
Now, there were some big words in there from Robert, but don't get hung up on them. The point was this: sugar is the key driver to virtually all the illnesses that you and I worry about today. Having said that, on this Sunday, I don't want you to worry about them anymore, because what we're going to do in the coming weeks will dramatically reduce your risk factors to all of them. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Stay happy, stay safe, and I look forward to spending time with you tomorrow morning. How did you find that video? If you're overweight, first of all, don't blame yourself. Yeah, I mean, I was fat and furious 25 years. That was me, Christmas Day 2008, a time when I was really exercising lots and lots, way more than I exercise today. I'm sort of 4 stone lighter now than that period then. So it's not your fault whatsoever. But this method really does work. Why don't you click above and see some of the testimonials of other people that have been on the reset and some of the staggering results they've got.